Thank you, Sam, for the introduction. And I hope to add that we also have some results from focus groups that we've done. So I hope that even energizes you more than just the survey. So I'm kicking off today's session. Today's session, we're focusing on understanding household energy decision making and vulnerability intersectional perspectives from Austria. Um, so, gender and household energy practices are, when we are talking about energy, we know that energy shapes and is shaped by our daily practices at household level, especially. Households are often treated as a single decision-making unit, but resources, responsibilities, and decision-making powers are not necessarily equally distributed, especially when we look at, for example, who's monitoring consumption, who's doing the chores and tasks around the house, and who's paying the billing, and so on. So we see some differences, especially when it comes to gender patterns. Gender norms continue to define the share of unpaid care work and household management, influencing both energy needs and also energy practices. And our understanding of energy practices and vulnerability, especially in policy as well as research, um, does not necessarily reflect on the intersectional examinations, but also does not reflect on the gender norms. So when it comes to some statistics, looking at some statistics from gender and unpaid care work, according to IGE, the care survey in 2024, in Europe, 59% of women do housework chores every day versus 33% of men. And when we're looking at when it comes to childcare per week, women are more than twice as likely as men to provide over 35 hours of childcare. In Austria, according to Statistics Austria 2023, in mixed sex couple households, two-thirds of childcare are provided by women. So as we can see already, some resources and unpaid work is quite putting women at inequality in the sense. But when we look at gender pay gap, we also see that women are quite paid less. So in Europe, according to IGE 2025, women across the EU earn just 77% of what men are earning on an annual basis. And this means that they must work on average 15 months and 18 days to take home what men are earning during that year. In Austria, according to Statistics Austria 2024, women earn 17.6% less per hour than their male counterparts, and the gender pension gap is 37.6%. In Austria specifically, our pension gap or our pensions are quite dependent on the full-time work and continuous work. So especially as women, if you're taking some time off for childcare and pregnancy, that also impacts your pensions. So when we're looking at both of this together, then we know that we already have a pattern that women are quite disadvantaged when it comes to resources and unpaid work. And then it makes us think about how these inequalities are translating when it comes to energy use and energy poverty. So in Europe, according to the European Commission 2024, between 8 and 16% of the EU population faces energy poverty. That is roughly between 35 to 72 million people. The difference between that is that some of the countries have different indicators of what is energy poverty, but still the numbers are quite shocking. In Austria, when we look at Statistic Austria 2026, which is one of the recent reports that has come out focusing on the year 2024, approximately 12.5% of households in Austria are affected by energy poverty, which is around 1.04 million people, or about 517,000 households. So that translates to 1 in 8 households affected by energy poverty. I must also say that these indicators looking at energy poverty are very much based on income and the the amount that each household is earning, which is also why we are thinking about, or we're rethinking about how energy poverty should be looked at when it comes to also gendered points and going beyond the what is earned at the household level. So we are in this presentation, we are reflecting on this mixed method study that we had done with research questions focusing on how are household energy decision making and vulnerability shaped by gender and intersectional social characteristics in Austria, and also what does this reveal about the gap between institutional responses and also the lived experiences. Then we have two sub-questions, one on how are energy-related decisions, tasks, and responsibilities distributed within the Austrian households. And the second one is how do key energy stakeholders understand, categorize, and respond to energy poverty, and where does it diverge from the lived experiences of affected households? So with these questions, we are using two theoretical framework. One of them is on energy vulnerability by Bozarovsky, which is looking at the fact that vulnerability should go beyond the income price efficiency triad. And that should definitely include household needs, social practices, built environment, heating system flexibility, and all of this together to determine who's vulnerable. It also mentions that energy vulnerability is also a socio-spatial point, so you should also look at the infrastructure around it and also what is happening within the households. The second theoretical framework that we are using is gender energy justice. That was a framework developed by Fenestra and Ozerol, looking at three levels of distributive justice, recognitional justice, and procedural one, which the first one looks at unequal energy burdens across gender and household type. The second one looks at whose needs, positions, and identities are acknowledged by policy. And the last one looks at who participates in household and institutional energy decisions. So what has been done so far? Since November 2024, when we started this work, we have already conducted a small-scale household energy survey in Austria, which my colleague Monica is going to reflect about. And we have also done focus groups with two groups. So one is at risk and energy poor people residing in Austria. And the second group is with key energy stakeholders addressing energy poverty and energy vulnerability, including some of the NGOs, energy providers, researchers, social service providers within Austria. As Sam also mentioned, this is more or less an initial insight to some of the work that we have done. So we are not completely done with the study. So I hope this is also a good teaser for you to get interested and maybe later read more about the publication that comes out of it. So I'm handing over to Monica.
Thank you very much, Azadeh, for providing the context and the theoretical framework of the work that has been done in Austria. In my part of the presentation, I want to present a few results with regards to the quantitative survey, and I will focus on gender disaggregated data about the general socio-economic findings, as well as energy consumption patterns, energy decision-making, energy cost, and information status regarding energy-related topics. So to give you an overview about the questions that have been asked in the quantitative survey, there have been socioeconomic questions like living situation, size of household, age, gender, education, and income. Energy and climate related questions dealt with energy sources used, energy saving measures, energy saving behavior, energy cost, climate change impact, and also perception of environmental concerns and energy consumption patterns, as said before. Please can I change the slide? Thank you. There have been also building related questions like the size of living space, state of building environment, and renovation measures taken. And last but not least, the survey participants were asked to evaluate the status of information with regards to energy-related topics or preferred information channels. The data has been quality checked. So if necessary and when necessary, it was manually corrected to avoid double counting or to remove outliers. And data from Statistic Austria also was used to cross-check the plausibility of the data. The sample size differs with regards to the different questions, as some of the participants did not fill in all of the questions. And the results presented here are based on frequencies. So in general, 362 answers were received, whereof 180 answers were given by male participants and 182 by female. The Austrian regions were covered according to their share of population. So 22% living in Vienna, 19% living in Upper Austria, in Lower Austria, and 17% in Upper Austria. That's not on the slide, but just to give you an overview about the distribution in Austria. And here is also the size of households depicted. So 38% of two-person households that take a share of two-person households take a share of 38%, and one-person households take a share of 30%. The gender disaggregated evaluation shows that 33% of one-person of female survey participants live in one-person households, and men live mostly in the two-person households without children, 39% compared to 36% with women, female survey participants. Concerning the living situation, it's shown here on this slide on the left-hand side. As said before, with the male survey participants, the greatest share is with couple without children, and female survey participants mainly live in single households, and the share of single-parent households for the female survey participants is 5% compared to 1% with the male survey participants. Concerning the age distribution, the largest group is the age group between 27 and 37 years, and followed by with a share of 23%, and followed by the 38 to 48-year-olds and 49 to 59-year-olds with 21% each. Next slide, please. Regarding the education, this slide shows that the female survey participants have a slightly smaller share with regards to primary school and master's degree, but a slightly higher share with regards to secondary school and bachelor's degree level. And having a look at the income level, as Azati said before, she had the concrete numbers. We have the income groups. The female survey participants have higher shares in the lower income groups, and significant lower share, for example, in the income group between 2,900 and 5,559 euros. For single family parent households in female single parent households, the income less than 1,079 euros is double compared to the female survey participant group, and with 11.5%, and even nearly 3 times the time the share of the total survey participants with 8%. An exemplary result with regards to the energy vulnerability is shown here. So the question was whether there have been energy cost areas because of the energy crisis in 2022. And 45% of female survey participants said they faced energy cost areas because of the 2022 energy crisis, compared to 31% with the male survey participants. Looking at female single-parent households, the share even increases to 67% in the diagram in the middle. Interesting, in my opinion, is the fact that the energy cost areas seem to be no matter of education. The share of female survey participants facing energy areas with university bachelor's degree was 12% compared to 9% of the totals. The energy consumption with regards to heating and cooling, domestic hot water, and cooking is shown here. The diagrams show that that male survey participants use gas more often for heating and cooling purposes, as well as for domestic hot water and also for cooking. Female survey participants use district heating, especially for domestic hot water preparation, and also biomass takes a larger share with regards to heating and cooling. Solar systems are used more often by male survey participants, and the share of women who do not know, that was also an interesting question, do not know what energy sources they use for heating and cooling is about 4 times higher than for the men. And with regards to domestic hot water, it's still 2.5 times higher compared to male survey participants. These slides show the energy-related decisions by age distribution. So the question was, who takes the energy decisions in the households? And the answers will dominate for the female survey participants, except the older than the 65-year-olds, that all adults decide together. For the male survey participants, the share of the answer "I decide because I know best, because I'm responsible" dominates, except for the 27 to 48-year-olds, where again all adults decide together dominates. For young female survey participants, someone else decides because she or he knows best, takes a share of 21%. And the landlord decides, it's about 18% for the different age groups. The energy cost of female survey participants is higher for male, is higher than for male survey participants, although the average size of living space is lower. So the median of the living space is 80 square meter for women, for female survey participants, compared to 84 square meter for male survey participants. But the cost is still higher. Could you please go back again to the last slide? Because yeah, I would like to mention again also the increased energy cost compared to the so the increased energy, how much the average monthly energy cost for all energy uses increased in the last year. And since the energy crisis, and 55% of the female survey participants answered that the cost increased significantly compared to 42% for the male survey participants. The knowledge about energy cost is also shown on this slide with 30% of female households for the female survey participants who do not know the energy cost. And this figure increases to 44% regarding female single-parent households. In contrast, 23% of male survey participants do not know about their energy cost. Next slide, please. That's now we come to the information status about energy and knowledge about energy. 44% of households feel well informed regarding energy management and energy saving issues, but 43% also say they could learn more. And the male survey participants answered that they could even learn more than the female. So compared, they said 47% they could learn more compared to 39% of female survey participants. Next slide, please. Oh, that's no. So I've just no. What I wanted to add here also about the channels of information they would prefer. The question they would like to learn, they prefer personal consulting over digital information like websites or social media, and printed information like flyer or brochures. With female survey participants, also videos, podcasts, or TV broadcasts and documentations would be interesting. Yeah, this was the last slide from my side, and I would like to hand back to Azadeh to also present about the focus groups that have been done by Eurogroup.
Thank you, Monica. So going to the focus groups. So again, as I mentioned, we're still in the middle of like bringing the results together. The work is not done, but we have also done some focus groups with at-risk and energy poor households, where we thought we had some interesting inputs to also share with you. So during our conversations with them, there are several themes that kind of came up repeatedly. One of them is that they did mention that energy poverty is a structural restriction that is affecting their lives, and they are kind of expected to deal with this on their own. So they talked about how this energy consumption requires ongoing consideration on a daily basis. So from every appliances that they're using, every shower they take, every washing that they do, it's constantly in calculation in their head about the costs. They have had to kind of scale back on some of the basic needs that they need to make sure that they can abide by what they can afford, but they have also exhausted their savings so far, so they're kind of at their ends with. And this has become kind of normalized within their households. And every day when they want to do any heating or showering and so on, they're regarding this as a luxurious. So sometimes they mention that after going through such hard times, and then they feel like it's a luxury to even take a shower. So that's what's happening. We've put a quote here from someone who was mentioning that it's been a year that they've been living without any heating, any air conditioning. They've put jumpers on during the winters and also worked in their underwears during the summer times to just make sure that they can pay for the basics of their daily lives, but they're also reaching a limit and they cannot really think of going on like this anymore. They talked about how energy is a part of social inclusion. So a lot of these social and digital activities are quite dependent on energy costs. If you're working, if you're doing education, if you want to stay social, you definitely need energy, and that's a prerequisite to be included in the society. And that has some mental consequences for them, mental health consequences for them. They talked about inequality despite employment, which is kind of used as working poor. So they were saying that employment does not necessarily protect one against energy poverty, and the fixed costs are raising faster than the income in Austria. So the energy prices have really regressed while their payments have not been kind of adapted to that. They talked about different strategies that they're using. They were talking about the fact that they're trying their best to optimize their energy use, and they have made sure that whenever the finances allow, that they can have more energy efficient devices. They're using any resources that they can get to make sure that they can make the best out of what they have. But again, savings are quite limited and investment requires capital, and they also have problems with that. So we also have a quote from someone who's attending our focus group mentioning that my father is an entrepreneur, but he can't afford to leave. I'm also an entrepreneur with three jobs, but I can't afford to leave either. And single mothers cannot really afford to leave at all. Then we also talked about this structure of barriers and institutional frameworks where they brought up the tenancy law, heritage protection, and utility infrastructure as a scope for the limits that comes with them and what potentially could be done. They talked about how access to funding is really difficult. There's a lot of paperwork and also stigma that is attached to that. As mentioned, they talked about health issues, energy poverty that affects physical health with cold, heat, but the molding that is taking place in their apartments and houses. And they talked about how mental health, not being able to go out or living in really cold spaces, is affecting the mental health. And the more they're affected, then the life and social inequalities are also in a cycle being affected. Then they talked a little bit about the fact that a lot of the problems that they're facing is really structural, but then it's as if they have to really act on them on an individual basis, on an individual level. So they were talking about the unfairness of individual adaptation versus the structural barriers that are out there, and the systematic crisis that is taking place. When we go to the focus groups that we did with the key energy stakeholders, what they brought up was that usually energy poverty or vulnerability becomes more apparent when we are during the crisis. So they were saying that maybe, for example, during the crisis after the Russian-Ukraine war, we had more people who were affected by energy poverty, but that just made it more apparent. So it was not as if it didn't exist. People were already trying to self-deprive themselves, but then as soon as the crisis hits, then it comes to light and we see how individuals are struggling with this. They also mentioned that usually people are connected with them when they already have back payments or they have disconnections in terms of electricity. So it's also at the very latest stage that they get connected with them and then they ask for help, which makes it more difficult to support them during this time as they're quite suffering at the moment. They also mentioned these different invisible groups when it comes to energy poverty and how they are not really a part of the policies. They specifically mentioned the working poor and also the students and single parents as part of the community that they are in touch with, but they're not necessarily addressed by the policies. We talked about access to help that is mostly mediated through social organizations. They're acting as essential potential intermediaries between the energy suppliers and also people who are affected. They also mentioned that the applications are quite complex. There's a lot of paperwork again. They said there's a lot of digital barriers, especially when it comes to the seniors. And also information is quite fragmented and they don't know what to trust. They also mentioned the stigma and symbolic barriers that are there. So they mentioned that sometimes people are even ashamed of asking for help. There's this stereotype of who's energy poor, and people do not necessarily want to associate with that. So there have been some neutral services in Austria that have been doing the intermediary work, and apparently that has been proven to be very successful, as individuals do not have to be in contact with the energy providers and themselves. Um, they also mentioned that energy literacy versus a structural overload was a topic for them. So obviously, a basic knowledge of energy is very helpful in managing the everyday life. But then they also mentioned that one does not have to become an energy expert to be able to just warm themselves in their houses. So sometimes they said that people have the right to ignorance, and sometimes the information is too much, and also there is a lot of demand put on people who do not necessarily even have the resources to spend time and maybe financial means on learning more about the energy systems. So they were talking about the fact that it's really unnecessarily complicated. So then it talks, we had some discussions about responsibility between the individual and the system. So they said that on the one hand, households are expected to adapt and optimize their behavior, but then on the other hand, a lot of the issues are completely structural when it comes to the prices, when it comes to the tenancy law. So if you're a renter, for example, in Austria, it's your landlord who has to decide on any renovation or anything that needs to be updated. If you're, for example, living in social or municipality housing, the energy provider is mostly decided by the government, so you don't have any say into changing that. So there are some pieces that do not necessarily fall together, and that has made it very difficult for the energy poor at-risk people to deal with their situation. So what they mention is helpful measures and services cited by the participants, the social services such as Caritas, Volkshilfe, Hilfsweg, and also the Red Cross in Vienna. They talked about that they have started some on-site energy information days at the social services to provide just information to people who are interested. They have also noticed that language barrier is as a very serious point. So they have started multilingual energy advice programs and also provided information materials to them. Some of them were talking about training, especially for the social energy advice for social workers that work with them. So then they're more sensitive towards this topic, and also in terms of language and your behavior when you go there to also avoid any further stigmatization. They talked about providing some financial assistance or subsidies for outstanding energy bills. But also we currently are going through some reform in Austria since April 2026 that is kind of helping with some of the tariffs for heating and cooling. But this was something that is quite recent, and we still have not really had the time to look at it or engage with it at this point. But as I said, we just have some key takeaways. So I think from what we are looking at, both from the survey that has been done, but it's still being analyzed, and the focus groups that we have a feeling that more inter-household data is needed to look at more intersectional data. And it would be great if it could be a standard in the measurements to not just look at a couple of points, but look at the compoundment of those intersecting identities together. We think that energy vulnerability and poverty should be gone not only through consumer protection or market competence, but also should become a part of the social and welfare policy. Governance should move away from individual adaptation and more towards the structural reform. And invisible poverty needs to be recognized by including new indicators to especially reflect on some of these gender gaps that were identified, but also to look at the household practices and social surroundings. So by that, we are at the end of our presentation, and then I hand over to you, Sam.
Thank you, Azadeh and Monica, for a great presentation. So much information there. I'm sure the questions will come flooding in. So we've got a couple already that you might want to have a quick look at while I just do a little bit of an advertisement for the TCP. Um, uh, yes, but even if you don't have a question, please do upvote your favorite ones because we will take them roughly in order of their popularity. But what is the User-Centered Energy Systems TCP? Well, you can see it's a technology collaboration program. That's what the TCP stands for. And it's part of the IEA Technology Collaboration Program, which is a broader suite of almost 40 TCPs dealing with all sorts of different topics. Most of them, to be honest, are focused on the supply side and technologies. We're one of a number of cross-cutting TCPs. And the next slide hopefully will show you where our sweet spot is. So we are at the intersection of social research and energy transition technologies. Our work is socio-technical when we look at the design of technologies. For example, we have our human-centric buildings task, which we run with the energy in buildings and communities TCP, so a joint task. Uptake is a big issue for many of our policymakers, and our executive committee is populated by 14 member country governments and some academics who support them, and some industry folk as well. Use is becoming increasingly important as we see that flexibility of the electricity system is having more and more value. Acceptance across all sorts of technologies from small household scale automation of end use devices through to acceptance of big energy infrastructure projects, whether it's high voltage transmission lines or onshore renewables, for example. And then impacts. And Actually, I wasn't sure whether to call this impacts or not, but essentially, this is where we come into really the empowering all task in particular, where we're looking not just at the impact of the energy transition on various groups in society, but also how best to engage with different groups in society to ensure that they can benefit from the energy transition as it progresses. And we have some interesting tasks outside of the empowering all task as well. We had a joint workshop between the empowering all task and our hard to reach energy users task last year when we met in Sweden, which I think got to the heart of many of the things you were saying as a day. To be honest, I was getting super, it's like there's so many issues that we need to resolve. And so it's great to see the solutions that we come up with at the end. And so many of these involve middle actors, some of them in the energy system, but actually many of them outside of the traditional energy policy institutional space. So if you do want to get involved, if you're an academic, you can contact me there, or if you're a policymaker from a country which you want to get your country involved. Either way, get in touch, and I can see how we can help you to get involved in the TCP. So, well, look, we've got around about a quarter of an hour left. We're going to take a few questions, and please do pop more questions into the pot as we go, if they occur to you as the Q&A progresses. So, the first question comes from Rosalina Lindo. So, asking about the definition of energy poverty in Austria. So, perhaps you might be able to answer that one.
I see Australia.
Yeah,
Some
I think I
checking.
assume that's a typo. So I think it's Austrian. So yeah.
Okay, great. So by the time that we started doing the survey, it was around I think 15% of your income. So if that was what you were spending on energy bills, then you were kind of at risk or at poverty. But we even went a bit higher when we were selecting people for our focus group. So we have people from 25 to 15% of their income is going into energy prices.
That's interesting actually, because I think there's an more EU-wide definition that looks at about 10%. And
Yes.
certainly that was the one in the UK. As you can probably tell, I'm from the UK originally, and it was 10% was the definition there. And so obviously your definition is actually kind of shrinking the pool of those that are in energy poverty, but also focusing on those that are most at need of support. Interesting to see actually in the EU legislation recently, there's been a push towards more support for households at risk of energy poverty, vulnerable households, low-income households, and also households in social housing where appropriate. And there to calculate the percentage of the energy savings obligation that should be targeted at these priority groups, they took a sort of weighted distribution of lots of different types of indicators that are collected at EU level with, I would have to say, variable levels of data quality, but kind of looking at the quality of the housing stock as well as the ability to pay and arrears on bills and so on. But yeah, very. But it's an interesting question. I don't think people use different definitions in different countries, don't they? And which doesn't always lead to the most consistent set of statistics across countries.
So if I may add, so I think from like very, very recently, there's like a sort of measure that is being put in place. So if you cannot, or if you're exempt from paying the national television fee, which is mandatory for everybody to pay, if you're exempt to pay that, then you can also like get some sort of support in terms of like an electricity bill and so on, which I think find it very interesting in terms of defining who gets to get some sort of relief when it comes to an electricity payment and so on. But also looking at the new threshold that is being set, what is missing is that if you are a single parent or if you're a student, you probably, with some of the either time that you have, like maybe you're working not even full time and so on, you may reach that threshold, but that would be barely surviving. So that's still not saying much, but better than having nothing.
Yes, that's interesting, isn't it? So sometimes we do see, particularly when it's access to support, that depends on whether countries administrators have access to a good income, a good set of data that really helps them target, and sometimes they need to rely on these proxies. Although that's quite an interesting one. I hadn't heard of that one before. So the next question comes from Tom Van Dyck. So could you elaborate on the subsidized tariffs? How do you target the support? Is it applied automatically? And this may overlap with your answer to that previous question.
Yeah. Think you still have to apply for it, but if you have already had the exemption of paying, for example, for the national television fee, then that probably accelerates your progress into being validated for that because you already have proof so far. But I actually just saw one ad on my Instagram today that was saying that, hey, we now have this in Austria. Do you think you're kind of offers to apply for this, click on this link. So I'm also seeing that they're promoting this across different social media channels, which I think is a very good idea from the government side as well. But it still has to go through some sort of application process. And the social intermediaries are also there to help people with that.
Great, thank you. I've got another question from Rosalina Lindo. I'm going to intersperse these with questions from others, but this one is quite an interesting one. So, could you share with us some examples of new indicators to measure invisible energy poverty?
So what I think what makes sense is to also think about the household constellation. So if you're a single parent or like how many people are living with you or are dependent on you. The other point is also the amount of time, the working hours, for example. If you're full-time, if you're part-time, probably also age or any sort of physical restraint could be helpful. Perhaps maybe care work in some way could be a part of this calculation. It could be about having like dependents as children or seniors and so on. So those are different factors that could be somehow taken in when you're thinking about poverty or vulnerability points.
Thank you, Azadeh. Yeah, that's a very thoughtful response. And it's for those interested in this, it would be worth having a look at our hard to reach energy users task outputs. Just check our website because there they've looked at various degrees of hiddenness with respect to energy poverty or sort of energy hardship, and right down to the most marginalized communities that are sort of invisible as a group as rather than just individuals. So, but yeah, thank you for your answer. I'm going to come now to Joy Clancy because she's a supporter of the TCP's work and has been doing work through this task indeed. And so Joy says it's an excellent piece of work, and she has a comment rather than a question. But please do feel free to respond. It's not only the social advisors who need energy education, but energy advisors who need to understand the social dimension of energy, as you have presented so clearly. So a big up kind of comment, but I don't know if you want to sort of elaborate any further on what you said during the presentation.
I fully agree with with the comments, and I think some of our expert groups were also reflecting on this.
And by the way, Monica, if you at all want to come in at any point, please
Yeah.
do. Most of the questions have kind of been directed at Azadeh so far. But let's see. So we got one here from which is actually I'm not sure whether this is directed to you or to Azadeh, but or maybe so it's just about it's a kind of clarification question, and it's is it 10% per month or per quarter? Now, of course, one could say, well, it doesn't matter because 10% as long as you're calculating the energy bill per month and the income per month and the energy bill per quarter and the income per quarter. But of course, energy bills do vary during the year, and there may be, depending on how the quarters fall, there may be some quarters which have significantly higher energy consumption than others. So
I
particularly
have
those that are using prepayment meters and things like that. So, but go ahead.
one more reflection is that I think in Austria also depends on your contract. So like sometimes you have a contract where you pay fixed fee and then at the end of the year it's like calculated, the consumption is calculated and then you get the difference. So then sometimes you're not even aware of how much the fee is going to be increased by the end of the year. Sometimes you're paying every 3 months, sometimes you're paying every month. So I think it kind of depends on the provider, the contract that you have, and so on. But I also think at the end of the day, like if you're having an annual salary and still a good portion of that is going to paying for the energy bill, then it's quite difficult.
Mm, indeed. Um, so coming back to Rosalina, so she asked, could you share with us if the energy consumption of females is higher than the energy consumption of males? So maybe Monica, I could come to you
Yeah.
with this one.
So there was not a question that could answer this in detail, but there was rather qualitative questions asked, like Azadeh also mentioned it in the focus groups. So is it possible that you use that much energy that you would like to use, or is it necessary that you save energy or you don't shower as much as you want to? Sort of questions were in the survey, but I didn't include it to the presentation. If you would like to get some more information about that questions, I could include it to the presentation that can be shared.
Yeah, that'd be good. I mean, I've seen some research that show that women tend to uh, like physiologically, there's a greater need for temperature regulation. So, space heating or cooling regulation compared to
Yeah.
men. So there would certainly be a greater need. Wouldn't necessarily mean they are actually consuming more. I've also seen evidence that men consume more energy on kind of transportation and other device non-household chore devices. So yeah.
Yeah, but I could include this breakdown for the qualitative questions if you would like to do me so.
Well, if you, yeah, I mean that could be useful actually. If you have the opportunity to add a slide or two
Yeah.
at the end of the deck, then we could include that in the slides that we share with
Mm,
participants. Great, thank you,
thank you, sir.
Monica. Okay, we got one other question from an anonymous attendee. So thank you so much for the information, for the informative presentation. May I know how I can, oh, sorry, access the slides. I've answered this one a few times already in the chat. So it will be on our website, www.userstcp.org/the-academy. But if you just go to Users TCP, if you just put Users TCP into a search engine, you'll find our website, and there's a button at the top of the website for the Academy, which will take you to all of our previous webinars. The information from this webinar will be available by the end of the week. As you just heard, Monica's going to add a couple of slides, but by Friday, hopefully we'll have the, well, I'm prejudging how long, Monica, you need to produce the slides, but
That
it
would
won't be
be,
long anyway.
yeah,
Yeah.
by Friday would be possible.
Yeah. But there is that's just the start of this question. So then it gets a bit more interesting. So what about the surveys themselves? So the results from the surveys now, I'm hoping we might be seeing a report published. And also, I mean, what do you expect the outcome of the research to be? So as a day you said that we're sort of there's still chances to engage with the research and as it comes to a conclusion. So this is probably quite a nice question to end with. Maybe both of you have some thoughts about next steps for this work.
So I think at the moment we are hoping to finalize our like analysis of the survey and also bring it together with what we have learned from the focus groups. We are hoping that in the next couple of months, the report of this is going to be out. Also, hopefully, with some recommendations from also to our ministry about how to maybe integrate or work with the social parts, but also to some of the energy companies and social workers to let them know what could be done besides what they're already doing. Also, maybe it's not a maybe. I'm sure that we also have a couple of good examples that are going into these reports. So in case others are interested in using that as a founding basis of starting something new. Or perhaps collaborating with them for an exchange. But at the moment, we are also thinking about how to take this up and maybe think about going more in detail, maybe extending our quantitative or qualitative work. So if you're interested in also collaborating with us, you can also get in touch with us, and then hopefully we can even write a grant together that could build on what we have already learned.
Great, thank you. Azadeh, anything to add, Monica, on that on from your side?
No, thank you.
Okay, great.
Great.
Well, look, thank you both ever so much for your presentation today. It's a great way to round off the academic year in the Users TCP Academy. As I foreshadowed at the beginning of the webinar, we do have we've got a bonus special next week on public engagement on energy infrastructure, which might be a completely different audience, but some of our regular webinar followers might want to join that one. And then we'll be back with the main academic year session beginning for 2026-27 in September, 9th of September, where we'll be inviting University College London to come in and tell us how AI agents can help households to navigate the energy transition, particularly flexibility provision. So you can see super diverse topics that we deal with, but all of them have one coherent thread running through them, and that's the user-centered aspect. So with that, have a great summer, everybody, and it just remains for me to say a big thanks again to Monica and Azadeh for a great presentation. See you next time. Bye bye.
Thank you,
Thank
Sam, and thanks
you.
everyone.
Thank you. Bye bye.
Bye.